welcome to the new climate of real estate. This is going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. Okay.
You are making it easy for everyone, though.
Yeah,
So I can't tell you how much I hate what Florida Realtors is doing with their forms. So the fact that you have a broker that is taking it upon herself to say, hey, we're going to take some things from companies that we like, some things from Florida Realtors that we like, and we're going to get rid of the stuff that we don't like. That is tremendous. Yeah. You know, because not every place is doing that. So
thank you. I try. I also know that one thing that will be, I guess, preventative as far as any of us ever getting sued is we're not colluding, because the documents that we're using are unique. Like CJ said, I took a lot of stuff from different companies, from some association stuff, but not really, because their stuff tends to be very wordy. And then I also asked for some advice between CJ and also Jamie, the attorney I just mentioned to you. So I have another attorney that's helping to make sure that these documents that we're talking about today are going to protect us. And also, worst case scenario, if we have to, I don't want to say sue, but if we have to, what's a nice way of saying it?
Pursue.
If we want to pursue, if we want to pursue,
we have to litigate
ourselves, there are going to be, you guys, I'm telling you right now, there are going to be many, many people that are going to try to get out of it or not. And so it's so critical that we have agreements that protect us, but also that we have people in place that if we need to go and pursue our compensation, we have a process. So I'll share a little bit about that process towards the end of the meeting, because I really want to start talking about the actual docs. So first and foremost, let's talk about the two main changes, which you guys all know, but let me just remind you, the two changes are number one. Okay, so the two main changes. Changes number one, as you guys know, you cannot show a home without a written agreement. That's pretty massive. August 17th is what, 24 days away? The second thing is our compensation, if you are working with a buyer, is not going to be in the MLS, right? Everyone knows this. Right. Yes, cool. Okay.
Do we know anything about the enforcement of item number one on that?
No. Let's not talk about enforcement yet, Mr.
Nope,
Whipple.
just curious.
Let's talk about, I want to specifically talk about the documents. So what I'm going to do with you guys today is I'm going to walk you guys through a bunch of different scenarios. Please sort of bear with me because I'm going to address a lot of your questions. Maybe hold off on your questions until I get to the end, because I'm going to talk you through lots of different scenarios. Scenario number one, you get a call. A buyer wants to see a home right now. You don't know them. They don't know you. You don't know if you want to date them or not, or marry them, right? In this case, I am suggesting that you don't ask for a full-blown buyer-broker agreement. How are you going to ask to get paid if you just met the person, right? So instead, what I am suggesting we use, it is a touring agreement. Okay, so if you guys have seen, Zillow also has a touring agreement. This is similar to theirs. Let me explain how you're going to use this. By the way, I'm giving you guys 3 scenarios today. Each scenario has a different agreement that you are going to use for that buyer. And I'm also going to give you the script that you are going to use when you meet with this buyer. And so you know exactly what to say. So scenario number 1, you just met this person. They asked you, Sherry, will you please show me a home? Absolutely, I'd love to. What you're going to ask them to sign is a non-exclusive agreement. This agreement clearly states that you are not going to get paid. Okay, bear with me. I know that's a little scary, but hear me out here. What the agreement does is it simply confirms that they're not working with somebody else, right? Because I don't want you showing a home to someone that has a buyer-broker agreement with another broker. So why are you using this document? You are using this because it's early in the relationship. You don't know if you want to work with them, and they don't know if they want to work with you. This allows you the ability to show the home. This allows you the ability to start to get to know this person. You can get to know them better, and only then determine if this is somebody that you want to work with. Your next step, by the way, is you will have to get a separate agreement if you decide you want to continue working with them, or maybe they want to make an offer on that home. That would be great. But Mr. Buyer, we're going to need to sign this additional documentation so that I can include an offer of compensation in my offer to the seller. So the script that you are going to use. So Courtney, it's so nice to meet you. I know you called and you want to see this home right away. I'm so glad I was able to get you in.
Me too.
Before we enter this home, I'm required to have you sign this. Just so you know, all realtors who show homes must have something in writing. So what this agreement states is that you don't have an agreement with another broker, which I know you said on the phone already.
Mm-hmm.
So it also states that if we work together, we are going to enter into a separate agreement. So I love that opportunity. I'd love to earn your business. Let's discuss that after we show the home.
Perfect.
Cool? Okay, so this is a really easy way because we all know that there are going to be people that are going to call you and you're not going to have time to do a full-blown consultation. They're going to be in town and they want to see the home right now. This enables you to sort of start that process. The most important thing about all of these changes is that you are communicating clearly so that everybody understands. If they understand exactly what their responsibilities are, there are less likely to be problems, right? Okay.
This allows us to keep going with the first one's free scenario.
Yeah.
Right. You're really thinking about it. Do you get that signed when you meet them before you go to the house?
You cannot open that door, Madison.
Yeah, so you email it to them first, or you bring it in with, because I would just bring it first.
That's a great question. So, okay, so I would say, number one, if you have the time, depending if, I mean, what if they're in the car and they're like, I want to see the house right now, I'm standing outside. I would just have a bunch of these. It's one page. So everything, by the way, I have linked. It's this. It's one simple document. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through them. You guys should all take the time to read them. They're pretty straightforward. I mean, this basically says, Section 1, the purpose of the agreement, it allows me to show you the home. Section 2, it acknowledges that you're not working with somebody else. Section 3, this is the length of time this is good for. Section 4, it says very clearly, no fee. There is no fee going to be paid. And then it says, if you do need my services for advocacy, for negotiation, we will enter a separate agreement. Equal opportunity, bam, you sign, they sign.
That's it.
So to answer your question, I would have this with me. If you had time to get it signed before, great. But you cannot unlock that door until they sign it.
Even if it's your listing.
If it's your listing, that changes things. You can.
Yeah.
Print these out, put a half dozen of them in the pocket in the back of the driver's seat and have them with you in case you need them.
Well,
Yeah, yeah. So if, I think what William just said is if you have them in your car with you. If you can have it set up electronically to send to somebody, great. They can just click a button and sign it, right? If you're going to meet them in person, then you can have it in person. To your question about when you have a listing, I would recommend anyone with a listing, anyone that shows up, open house, and they're without an agent, you have them sign an agreement like this, whether it's this particular agreement, which is fine, okay, because they're acknowledging that they're not working with another agent.
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is you'll have an open house, they'll walk in, they'll meet you, they'll like it, you'll show them, okay, and then some other agent will come and submit the offer for them and say that they're the procuring cause. Well, they're not the procuring cause because you have an agreement signed stating that they're not working with another agent. So if they're not working with another agent, and then your listing agreements, this kind of goes to what we'll talk about next time. Your listing agreements dictate what you're supposed to get compensated and whether or not you're offering cooperating broker compensation. But what if Premier Listings has both sides? So I have a couple of different ideas for those types of things, but I want to wait till the listing agreements are out and Jordana and I work on the listing agreement too. But I mean, you guys are at a brokerage too, where you have a lot of agents. You have an open house. There's some agents that only like to do listings. There's some agents that specialize in buyers. Listing agents could potentially have, agents at their office who are buyer side agents that are there to help with the showing so that the whole brokerage is actually signing the agent up. And then you could have a deal with each other. So instead of running the risk of having it co-brokered, you have somebody there at the open house that's helping out. That's something that is
And if you remember, everything's negotiable. So in that case, for example, I like that idea because theoretically, if it's your listing, but maybe you want somebody else in the brokerage to show it, it could be at a reduced rate, meaning I will only charge you 1% because it's my associate's listing and I'm representing you on this transaction. I did not spend 6 months showing you every single home in all of Palm Beach County.
Exactly. So think about when you do a listing agreement, people that they 6% and then they're offering cooperating broker. But if we get both sides, we do 4% or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a way to ensure that someone walking in without a realtor is not going to come back later and say, oh, this other realtor has to submit the offer and they get cooperating broker compensation. No.
May I ask a question, quick question? So this agreement is the particular property. So if I ask, are you working with another broker? And the person, yes, I've been seeing houses with another broker. So the agreement is for that particular property that I'm touring, right?
Okay,
Or
so
not?
if you say that, Ruth, and the person says to you that they are working with another broker, you have to stop right there and say, well, that broker needs to show you this home. Why would you show a home if they're working with another agent? So you guys, I really would like to keep going because the other scenarios are going to explain it. There are multiple options for you. We have about 4 options of documents that you're going to use with your buyers. It depends on the scenario. So let me keep going and please hold some of your questions because I promise you I'm going to answer a lot of it. Scenario 2, the buyer you are working with, they don't know you well enough for you to ask, and they've resisted signing a full-blown contract because you're still in that process of getting their full know, like, and trust. Let me explain that for a second. If you guys have been in real estate for a while, we all know this saying, right? People work with people that know, like, and trust, that they know, like, and trust. You will be their chosen realtor if they know you, they like you, and they trust you. Understand, if you think about a range of know, like, and trust, in the early range, right? Let's say 0 range of I don't know you, I don't like you, and I don't trust you. That's when you're going to use a touring agreement, which again confirms they're not working with somebody else and you're opening the door for them and there's no fee, there's no compensation agreed upon at that point. Level 10 is when you absolutely know them, you like them, they trust you, and it's you've worked with them before. That's going to be the full buyer broker. There's going to be in between. The scenario we're talking about right now is with someone that you are going to ask them to sign a single property agreement, which allows you to get paid if you represent them on that one particular property. So let me show you that agreement and then I'm going to give you the script. So again, what this is a transaction broker agreement. This states, and I am going to walk you through this, by the way. First of all, this is 1 page, okay, which I love. Super direct. It's super easy. Like CJ said a minute ago, the Florida Association of Realtors, and a lot of times even the National Association of Realtors, their documents are written in such a way, there's a lot of extra wording. It is a lot of legalese. And the Consumer Federations of America do not like them because it makes it harder for the consumer to understand what they're signing. So the purpose of this document is to make it so direct and so easy that the person understands. Because if they understand, that'll make a lot less contentious situation because they understand. You told them from the beginning exactly what you're going to get paid and exactly how you're going to get paid. So this is a transaction broker agreement. It states that you as that the buyer agrees to pay the broker fee, which will be included and in the offer and paid by the seller. Okay. It also confirms an important point, which is that they are not working or under contract with somebody else. Okay. When are you going to use this? You are going to use this if you don't feel comfortable or maybe they've resisted in some way and they don't want to sign an open-ended buyer broker. An open-ended buyer broker basically says, I will work with you, Ross, for any property that you purchase in all of, Florida. That's an open buyer broker. And Ross might say, Jordana, I went to law school and I'm not signing this. So I would say, okay, you know what? If that's the case, here is a single property representation agreement. What this does, and by the way, it spells everything out here in the agreement. it says, you know, as a transaction broker, these are some things I'm going to do. I'm going to be honest and fair. I'm going to account for all funds. It also explains very clearly that number one, the fee is negotiable, which, like CJ was saying earlier, is one of the requirements of the settlement. It has to say in bold that the broker fee is not set by law and is fully negotiable. It also says very clearly, broker will request to have the broker fee paid by the seller of the property by including the broker fee as a part of any offer. So again, in this scenario, and it has an amount right here. So you can say, Ross, my fee is 3%. I'm going to be charging you 3% if we decide to move forward on this home. And this property does enable you to write in a couple of properties. It's called a single property buyer rep. But if you have, let's say you have 2 full days of showing scheduled, and you've got maybe like 10 properties, write them all on this, and you are now protected. Because if they want to move forward on any of those properties, they've already agreed to the fact that you will include that in your offer. Does that make sense? Yes.
Well, if they sign that, what if they have a buyer broker with someone else, if they want to use you for that day?
Nope.
Or what if they're gonna buy a broker after? But then you're
Okay, but hold on, Madison, if they have a buyer broker with somebody else,
Well, like, what
then they're
happens-
on the hook to pay that person because they have signed something that says, I will pay you a percent, let's just call it 3, I will pay you 3%, right? And then now they sign a document that says, okay, Madison, if you show me this home, I'm gonna pay you 3%. Now they're paying you 3 and the other broker 3. So it is so important that we communicate this. And when you have someone sign it, you clearly say, I want to make sure you realize, Mr. Buyer, that you can, if you signed a contract with somebody else, I cannot move forward in representing you.
Can I? Well,
Yes.
Let me comment on that because I understand where you're coming from on that, but I also want, you're thinking like very ethically, over the top ethically, okay? And I hate to say this, but you know, if this is not, it's not unethical for you guys to sign a buyer broker or a showing agreement with someone who has another agreement, okay?
It's not.
No, and here's why. Okay, because that buyer, that consumer signed with somebody else, and now they want to use you guys, let's say.
Okay.
Okay, so now your agreement on here states, I'm not working with another agent. But what if they are? Oh, okay, you are working with another agent? We have an attorney that works on staff. Why don't you send us the agreement for him to review? And if he can get you out of it, great. But he may not be able to. So are you comfortable knowing that if you sign this agreement with me, my compensation is earned and you might be on the hook to pay that other person too? Because then now when you structure a deal, what if you're structuring a deal with the seller where you get a 5%, concession from them? Now your fee could be covered and that other agent's fee could be covered too, if you know that going into it. Or this is something you might have dealt with this before. Do you know the MV Realty company? Okay, so the company that goes around and pays the listing, the sellers to enter into a long-term agreement with them that says, hey, you're going to have to list the property with us. And if you don't, we lien your property and then we still get paid.
Right.
There are going to be companies that go around and have, and they're going to have buyers sign buyer broker agreements. And then the buyers are going to be like, well, I have to use them, but they're not helping me buy. So what do I do? Almost all the time with MV Realty, every agent that we've dealt with has negotiated some sort of, you're going to get 1% on this or a 1.5% or whatever. And then guess what? We close and the seller ends up paying them because the seller chose to enter into that agreement. These buyers are choosing to enter into buyer broker agreements. There is a way for you to still go under contract and get paid and deal with that other agent as long as it is all disclosed to the buyer.
Okay, so I think everything that CJ is saying, I agree with you, but I guess I'm coming from the perspective of I want to make sure that we are servicing the client and the buyer is that we're taking care of them.
Yeah.
That's part of
It
our
needs to
job.
be, but my point is the next step needs to be, let us review this
Absolutely,
agreement so that you can figure out the way that we can move forward.
Right. So
Okay.
I think
And instead of saying, we can't work with you.
So that's a really important point. So essentially, Madison, and the idea would be, well, you know what? I know you just said you signed it with somebody else. Do you have a copy of it? Can I see it? Is there a cancellation section in there that allows you to cancel? Because it sounds like that other broker that you signed with, you're not happy and they're not helping you find the property you want. I would love to move forward with you. I can move forward with you.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, because again, we don't want to I don't want to do it in a way in which they had no idea. So and this is part of why the very first thing I said was, what's going to matter is your ability to communicate and your understanding of all of these nuances, because there's a lot of contracts going back and forth. So CJ, yes, I'm being ethical.
Yeah.
Yes, I want you guys to earn. If you can have that conversation and say, well, if you have another contract, I would like to see it. We have an attorney on staff and let's talk about getting that canceled right away.
Yeah.
You know, send a text right now.
Or maybe you'll find out that it's not exclusive. And they're like, oh yeah, I am working with somebody.
Okay.
And then we read it and then what? And it's
That
like,
is-
oh, this
okay.
is not exclusive.
Zillow and
You know?
so many other companies, including EXP, are using non-exclusives, which essentially means that somebody might say, oh no, Madison, you're right. I did sign something. Your response needs to not, okay, bye. It needs to be more, okay, well, is it an exclusive agreement? And they're like, I don't know. Well, do you have an copy of it? Is it on your phone? Can I see it? Can you text it to me? Can you email it to me? Can you cancel it? Let me show it to my attorney. All of these additional questions matter, but you have to understand, again, like the basic concepts of how this is all going to work. Because like CJ said, you can still move forward with them. We just want to be really clear with exactly what position that puts them in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the biggest issues going forward, because there are going to be places that go around and just sign people
Yep.
up and then come out of the woodwork later on looking for compensation.
Or there are going to be scenarios where a buyer signs an agreement with somebody and then decides this is not the realtor for me. I do not like that. They're not responsive to me. They're not taking good care of me.
I asked them and they said, no, we don't have any agreement. We went up in contract to find out what it shows, but they did.
Okay, if they have an agreement, they did not disclose it to you,
They lied.
like CJ said, that's on them. If they're lying to you and they get pursued, that has nothing to do with us. That is a different contract between another brokerage and their agent.
Right.
Okay.
We are getting deep into the weeds and hypotheticals.
Yeah,
Do we have
let's
a
keep moving.
Q&A at the end?
Okay, so I want to make sure, so in this single property agreement, I just read you guys this. I want to make sure that you guys see clearly these important facts, because like CJ said, part of the settlement is the fact that broker fees are not set by law and are negotiable. That does not mean that you cannot tell them what you charge. This is who I am and this is what I charge. Can they negotiate with you? Sure. Can you say no? Of course. No, I'm not going to reduce it. Can you say yes? Yeah, if you want to, depending on the price, depending on a lot of different factors, depending on how many homes you've showed them, depending how difficult they are, depending on so many different things. Okay, now let me give you the script for this agreement. So, Courtney, before we start showings, I just need you to sign this agreement. This explains that I will be showing you these homes today. If you move forward, I will request that my fee is paid by the seller in our offer. Again, you have to explain this. This is not a situation where you're handing them a document saying, oh, just sign it. You have to be clear so they understand that you are telling them you are going to be paid. It is going to be clearly in the agreement what you're charging. And when you present an offer to the seller, it will include that you are getting paid that amount. Okay, let me keep going. Oh, I do want to point out, there is an alternative form. It's called the showing agreement. It does the exact same thing as the single property agreement. It's just another version. It's also one page. I'm telling you that because I want to give you guys options when you read these documents, the single property buyer rep agreement, you might decide, you know what, I like the term showing agreement better. It's up to you. I sort of like buyer agreement, single property buyer rep, because it says that you're representing them. I wanted to point that out because for those of you guys that are with Premier Listings, I think there are some agents here that aren't. When you go to I have a cheat sheet of links to all of these documents, you're going to see this. I explained in the cheat sheet, it explains what it does. It essentially does the same thing as the single property agreement, which again, if you show them that home, you were telling that person, I'm going to ask to get paid if you move forward with an offer.
something, because I'm thinking that I show so many properties in one day, signing one for each property.
No,
will be-
you don't have
No.
to sign it for,
So, but if it's, one that I say is, maybe it's a person that, I don't know, but I'm gonna show 7 properties. Can we have a little space more? that I can do
so
all of
the
them?
way this agreement is written is it says property or properties. So you can write everything in. I really wanted to make it 1 page. I do not want you guys, so if you want to, scribble it in or write on the back to cover yourself, you can do all of that. If you even want to add a 2nd page and say, see attached page, just for the purposes of making our lives easy. So all of you can have this 1-page document printed out 100 times in your car. And then if you want to write on a blank piece of paper, and then you put where it says property, see attached. Because the single property buyer rep agreement can be used for a day when you're showing 10 properties.
Can,
I would rather you have a complete buyer broker, which I'm going to talk about right now. So let me keep going, and then we'll come back and circle it back to when you use what.
Try to use this.
Right.
So let's go through the
Use-
forms that I would, because we can make the term for like a day. If you
But
want.
sometimes you don't know the person.
Right, so let me keep going, and then at the end, we can start brainstorming on what document to use with what buyer. What I did not want to do is I did not want you to get up in a situation that you had no idea what to do, because there are going to be so many different scenarios. Okay, scenario number 3. You've been working with this buyer for a long time. You have a relationship. You have their complete know, like, trust, right? Level 10. You've already done your buyer consultation. You are ready to move forward as their exclusive agent. By the way, this is what you want to happen 99.9% of the times. I just wanted to give you options, and I was trying to tell you guys to not ask questions, but it's okay. Because this document, I think, is going to protect you in most of the cases. It really will. So let's talk about this document. So this buyer broker agreement, importantly, has a conditional termination. That is probably, I think, the most important part of this, because what we do not want to happen is for people to try and cancel and tell you that they owe you nothing, even though you've spent, we had this just happen, unfortunately. We had an agent that spent, I think it was 3 years with a buyer and presented multiple offers. I think it was like 10. And then that buyer went and worked with somebody else, and we found out. Okay, so we asked, what's going on here? And in this agreement, it says in the cancellation section, the buyer can cancel at any time. Now that's a different situation. I'm not going to go into all the details on that, because I think we're going to still be able to collect. But what I want to make sure you guys are using conditional terminations. Now, let's talk a little bit about what, oh, well, you know what, hold on. I think I have a closer screenshot of it. Okay, I want to break this agreement down, and we'll get to the conditional termination part. But again, this is the agreement I want you guys to use the most. So it's 2 pages. Let's go through it together so you guys understand it and can start using it right after this meeting. Okay, so I'm going to read it. This agreement is designed to allow a buyer to engage a qualified licensed professional, you, for the purpose of viewing a property, receiving contract negotiation and advocacy services throughout the entire real estate offer and purchase process. Okay, that's the sort of intro statement, right? Section 1, properties. The undersigned buyer engages the broker to represent the buyer concerning these properties. And this is where you're going to check off residential, unless you're working on commercial, and geographic area. This is where you're going to put something relatively open-ended. I would recommend the county or maybe even the state. Courtney does the whole state. I think that's a good idea, especially if a lot of us are on counties that sort of like border another county. So like, like William, you might want to put like, Indian River.
I always use Florida because of that.
Yeah. So I recommend starting with the state of Florida. If they balk for any reason, you can say, no problem. Let's just put, Indian River, St. Lucie, and Martin or whatever. Okay. So that's section 1. Section 2 is the length of the agreement. You must put a termination date. You cannot leave this blank. What do you recommend for termination date?
Year.
List a year, as long as you can, but it depends on what the client is. I mean, you can put a year on here, no problem. And again, this agreement, like Jordana said, is you have a relationship with the client by this point, so you should be talking with them. Hey, you're looking for a type of property that there may not be a lot available right now, so we need a lot of time to be able to look. I mean, if you can do a year, just like a listing agreement. How long do you list for?
Now,
Think about these agreements as if they're listing agreements. It's
Yeah.
just the opposite side now, you know?
so you could even, if you're showing somebody a home today and they've told you I probably won't buy until next year, I'd make it even 2 years.
Yeah.
Like protect yourself.
Yeah.
Like don't be shy. Okay, that's section 2, length of the agreement. Section 3 is the agency disclosure. Now, this was something that I put in for premier listings because we always operate as transaction brokers. So it explains here, and it's basically a transaction broker disclosure. It explains all the things that are our responsibility as a transaction broker. That's section 3. Okay. Section 4 talks about your efforts. What are the things that you are going to be doing to ask for compensation, right? To justify that. You're going to locate and present the suitable property, number 1. Number 2, you're going to tour and prepare detailed analysis and reports. Number 3, you're going to prepare, negotiate, and secure contracts. Number 4, you're going to cooperate with other real estate licensees. And number 5, perform other services as needed. Okay, that's pretty clear. Section 5, for best experience, the buyer is encouraged to be accompanied by you. So this is important because it basically says that that person should not be going to see properties without you, or going to walkthroughs, or trying to call the seller, or conduct negotiations without you being present. It also states, the last sentence here, buyer understands that signing more than one buyer broker agreement for any overlapping period of time could expose the buyer to liability for paying additional fees. So they can't try and tell you that they didn't know that because it's right there. Okay. The next section is the broker fee. Buyer agrees to pay broker as provided below for any properties involving the broker's efforts. I don't know about this sentence, CJ. It says, this is what EXP has, and I don't like it. It says, no broker fee is due if broker's efforts involve only locating and presenting suitable properties for consideration.
Oh.
Are you kidding?
So,
If you didn't write the offer. you
So
don't get
here's
paid.
why.
yeah,
The
this
reason,
gets into like the conditional termination.
yeah, so here's why, you guys. The reasoning why, if you look at section 4, right, and look at B, C, D, and E, the argument is that we get paid not for A, we get paid for B, C, D, and E.
Right.
That's what this is basically saying. Because if you read the next sentence, it says,
So, well, let's say this agreement expires and they don't go under contract. Do you get paid?
no,
No, you could, right? Cause can't you put like money?
only if they buy.
If
So-
they close, so this is, if they close, let's say you go under contract and they cancel during the inspection period, do you get paid?
No.
No,
You wanna get, I mean, this is the thing, so there are gonna be all types of other agreements and everything too. So it's like, this is a selling point for you guys, like, hey, by the way, if you don't find anything, you don't have to pay me. That like this is something that we use. If you guys don't close, we're not charging your clients for the services that we provided for the
Right.
close. It sucks, but that's
Right.
like the cost of
Right.
doing business for us. This is a selling point for you guys. And I mean, you individually, you could all talk to Jordana and be like, I don't
Move
want
it,
mine
yeah.
to be on that. There are additional terms, you can modify it. But my recommendation, if you're gonna modify the form, is that you go through your sales manager, you go through Jordana to make sure that that language is approved.
Well,
You know,
so right
because
now these forms are
Let's say you
all,
don't wanna do that and you wanna get paid for some of you might wanna charge a retainer. You know, and that's a possibility, but for these forms, these are for everyone to be able to use. And then there's benefits to things like that, like utilize the selling point of, hey, by the way, if we don't find something, you don't have to pay me. Because there's gonna be other people out there competing with you that their agreement does say that they get paid for whatever reason, you know?
Right.
And it's all gonna depend on how you wanna deal with your buyers individually
So-
too.
I think the
I
idea.
would run a highlighter through it and say, hey, look, you're not paying me to be Zillow. You can find a house on your own. I'm
Yeah.
here to help you to get through the deal. And and make that a smooth transaction.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, that's a great point, William. And I would like to add to that point, I would tell them, like, listen, I get paid when I advocate for you, when I negotiate for you, when I put together the contract for you, when I do all the things that I do to make this process work. That's how I get paid. Finding a property, you can go online and find a property. That's not my job. And that is an important point of differentiation, because if people think that is the only thing that we do, then we are already losing, because that is not what we do.
Can
And you
we
guys
just add 2 more words?
What are those? What are the 2 words you want to add?
No broker fee is due if the buyer involved only locating and representing properties for consideration that do not go to contract or do not.
Let me think about this. I'm not gonna answer that now. But again, this is a weird one. But if you read it again, it does say buyer agrees to pay broker as provided for any properties involving broker's efforts, section 4B through 4E, and 4B through 4E explains all of the things that you are doing other than just finding it. So this is a little bit of like a minor point. Let's not get stuck. Let's keep moving. Okay, so the broker fee, again, is not set by law and is fully negotiable. It is due and payable upon successful closing. So that's another important point that you might want to tell them. Like, you are not going to be liable for anything unless you close on a property. That's important.
We need to add something to that, or buyer default.
Oh, good point. Which one is this? This is the
Yeah, that's one of the things that I noticed on there.
or buyer default under, okay.
Yeah, so like if your buyer goes under contract, okay, they cancel during the inspection period. Okay, fine, you don't get paid, you look for another property. What happens if they go all the way to closing and they don't want to buy anymore and they're in default? You guys should get paid.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So
I've
that's
actually had that happen.
That in being careful
too,
about
yeah.
the different agreements that we're putting together. And again, we're still developing all of this
Yeah.
stuff. So like, I know, like I have notes and everything too. And as we're going through this, I'm like, oh.
What
there's
about
another
this?
idea.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about different things to put in there, and then the final forms, just like Florida Realtors has to update forms periodically,
yeah.
all different things. And then, for you guys too, I go to all different places, and if I get an idea and I'm like, that's an idea we should put in all of our forms, I'm calling Jordana saying, hey, this isn't a great idea to put in this specific form for whatever reason.
Yeah, so-
we're constantly thinking about different things to put in these.
I want to let you guys know that things are evolving every single day. So like Sean, you and I last night talked about the listing agreement. Like, I've already changed it 3 times since we spoke. And so for those of you guys that are with Premier Listings, all of these are all going to be links that live on the PLA to documents that are going to be live, which means that he just added 2 really important words, even though he's reviewed it already. So he just remembered, and I have another attorney that might give me some other suggestions. So just understand that these are all going to be sort of living documents that are going to change, and just use the links on the PLA. Those are going to be the most up to date. Don't use a PDF. These are Word docs that are, or sorry, not Word, Google Docs that are set to a permission that nobody can change it. So if you do have a suggestion, or you want to even make something on your own, like Lori, if there's 2 words that you want to add, you can make a copy and make it Lori's buyer broker and add in some stuff that you want to. I would not advise that unless you run it through me and an attorney, so that we can make sure that everything is kosher. Okay.
It has to be run through Jordana, since Jordana is the agent on this. She's the broker and you represent her. She's got to approve it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have a slide at the end where we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that this is an agreement between the buyer and the brokerage, okay? Which also means that there are going to be instances where we can probably help a person because it's a brokerage relationship and not just a single agent relationship. In the example that I mentioned a minute ago about the buyer that closed without us, he had voiced to the agent that he did not think that they were working out. It wasn't a fit. He was basically breaking up with him. And so and the agent didn't know what to do because he didn't know. But I'm telling you guys right now, if someone tries to break up with you, it's okay. It happens. You'll be okay. And what you're going to do is you're going to tell me.
Yes.
And what I'm going to do is find another agent that can service that person so that you get paid and they get paid. So there will be a referral or something like that. the fact that we are a decent sized brokerage gives you options. So that, and you are allowed to also say that you can break up too.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, Madison, I know I signed this agreement to show you homes, but I'm just not enjoying it. And I'm gonna ask Sherry to be your agent. So because it's a brokerage document, it is not an individual agent document. It is so important that you stay in good communication. The number one thing that you can do as a realtor right now in this climate is communicate. The more you communicate, the better. Okay, so let me keep going. Okay, so this is interesting, right? Because the last sentence of this paragraph says that this agreement shall act as escrow instructions for payment of the broker fee, which is sort of cool. We don't have to wait for somebody else to authorize it. It's already telling a title agent, these are your instructions. And this section shall survive the expiration or earlier cancellation of this agreement. And then you have to choose one. Underneath is where you're going to put, is it a percent or an exact dollar amount? So Sherry, you might have someone that says to you, maybe they're buying $100,000 property and you don't want to take 3%. You're like, my minimum fee is $5,000 and 3% of 100 is 3,000. So if you'd like to work with me, I'm happy to work with you, but understand that I'm a veteran agent. I've closed this many deals. I'm a damn good negotiator, and I'm going to negotiate right now for myself because my minimum fee is $5,000. So these two little
That's especially good on things like land deals.
Yes.
Yes.
So these two check boxes, it's the worst straw ever. Sorry. These two check boxes essentially enable you to tell that client what you are charging. And again, it's negotiable, right? It's not set by law. It's up to you to decide it. Okay, let's keep going to the next.
Really quick,
Yeah.
yeah. Section 6 is that says it doesn't expire. So is that saying you're getting paid? Like that last sentence.
Oh, that it shall survive.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
what
not
is that?
Shall survive the expiration or early cancellation. Okay, so let's say you have a 6-month agreement.
Yeah.
And you go under contract to purchase on, month 5, day 29.
Uh-huh.
Now this agreement expires, you still get
Yes,
paid though.
yes, yes.
Because it will, that closing could take a year. Think
Yeah.
about like new construction too, that
Yep.
those closings take 2 years. So just because this agreement expires, as long as you're under contract with your buyer, you still get paid.
Thank you.
So yeah, same thing as a listing agreement.
Okay.
That's what that language is about.
That's a
And
good question.
And also there's the protection period in there too. So the protection period covers you after the termination date. So it has to, that section has to survive the
Because
termination.
what if you expire, like, let's say in the first week that they're under contract and they don't close for another 30 days, the
Right.
protection period protects you.
Yeah. So there's that section, and then we'll talk more about the protection period with the conditional termination.
Okay, section 3, collecting fee from the seller. So I just realized this doesn't say anything about the seller's broker.
Okay,
So we should probably add that.
so and you see why, because of
Yeah, I
what
see.
EXP did. with
Yeah,
those.
I just got, like, I had an aha moment.
So there's 3 different ways to get paid. There's from the listing broker, there's from the seller, or there's from your buyer, right? And this agreement doesn't have the listing broker on it, because there are going to be some listing brokers that make it their determination that they're never going to offer cooperating broker compensation, which, has benefits and drawbacks, which we can talk about at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one thing that
So I think we will change this after this meeting. 'Cause
doesn't need to have listing.
just had an aha moment, because essentially what this little box says is that our fee is going to come from the seller. And sometimes there are going to be many listing brokers that get a full, let's say 6%, and they are the ones that are paying. The listing broker pays. So this will be changed. So I'm not going to read this. Okay. Section.
Well, we could still go, so like the credit to buyer, for instance, you submit an offer, there's no cooperating broker compensation. So your offer says, here's our offer, and we're getting a credit from the seller for 5%. That's how you get paid. Now you go back to your buyer, hey, I didn't just get us 3%, I actually got us 5%. Great.
If I remember the
So
question.
now they're paying for,
No, I'm going to talk
it
about
cannot be on the as-is contract. You guys need to do separate compensation agreements.
I have
with
those
the
agreements.
listing broker or the seller.
So I put those agreements in this presentation so we can talk about that because it cannot be just a line item on the additional terms. It has to, it's a very standard, I do think the association document is good, actually.
Yeah, those are, well, yeah, that's what we got for right now.
Yeah, that's all we have.
To use, yeah.
Okay, so again, so in this section, the first one says credit to buyer at closing, just like CJ explained. Another possibility is direct seller to broker compensation, which would just be a line item on the HUD or on the closing statement. Closing statement's gonna say the seller is paying,
You still need to have the agreement with the seller.
right?
But then on the statement, it's, you know, just like your commission is paid now on the statement from the seller to the brokers, it's gonna be the seller to Premier Listings. That's fine. And then the other option is the buyer to Premier Listings.
So really what's changing, you guys, is just the column. Which column? Is it the column on the right for
Yeah.
the seller, or the column on the left for the buyer?
Yeah,
That's all it is. Okay, other buyers, the buyer acknowledges that you may be representing multiple buyers in purchasing the same property? You think we should leave that there?
well, you
Like
kind of have to, because let's say you have two buyers that are looking for properties in Palm Beach County. And they're both looking at, you know, single family homes, $500,000 that have 2 bedrooms. You might show them the same property. They might want to submit offers on the same property,
Okay,
you know?
I have had multiple offer situations for multiple buyers on the same property. It's happened more than once.
Yeah, you have to disclose that to them.
okay. So this is probably the most important part.
Let me, one comment.
Yes, please.
The other reason you have to disclose that, and we talked about this before, you're a brokerage. This agreement is with the brokerage. You don't know, Maria, if you have an agreement with a buyer and you're showing the same property that Madison is showing that buyer. It's the same company showing them. So you have to have that in there.
True, that makes sense.
Okay, so you guys, this is probably the most important part of I think, of the agreement, because this is what, in some like corporate worlds, they call it the postmortem, which basically means what happens if something goes wrong. So if something goes wrong, this paragraph is what's going to protect you. So what this says is that at the consumer's request, the broker, which is us, we may agree to conditionally terminate this agreement. So we are not required. If they come to you after years of working together, or not years, but let's say months of showing homes and they want to cancel, this protects you because you can say, no, we're not canceling. It also states that there is a cancellation fee if we decide to agree to cancel. So CJ said a minute ago, like a $2,500 fee, let's say, because I have shown you this many homes and I have been in the car this number of hours and I have spent this amount of gas money and I've sent this many emails and this many phone calls, I still want to get compensated for that, all those efforts. And that's what that cancellation fee explains.
Do you have to put the amount?
Yes.
for the client?
You have to put a cancellation fee amount. You absolutely do. Yeah.
Even if it's 0.00 or whatever.
Oh,
but it's-
you can put 0 if you're like, I'm not going to charge you a cancellation fee. Yes. But this protects us in case they, again, you've found them the home and they're like, you know what, I'm going to go use this other realtor for it. No. So this is a really important section.
I like this better than doing a retainer, which is the option that you have on the FAR contracts.
Right.
Yeah, well, so this language is mirrored from the Florida Realtor contract, okay? So this agreement is kind of like a Frankenstein of a bunch of different agreements. And Jordana and I talked about this conditional termination. If you guys have a year-long agreement and 5 months into it, the buyer's like, I don't want to buy a property anymore. Okay, well, then we can conditionally terminate, and I've already shown you 10 properties. Our fee is $2,500, so I will cancel it for you. Pay me $2,500. Okay, that's one scenario where it ends, right? And if they say, well, no, okay, well, then they're kind of breaching the agreement by not looking for more property, you know? So then you guys can make a determination as to what you want to do. If they cancel the contract or they want to cancel it and they say, I'm not interested in looking anymore, and you say, okay, fine, pay me the $2,500, they pay you. And then the next day they go under contract with someone else, you can void this conditional termination and say, well, you paid me the cancellation fee And then when you close, you still owe me my compensation because they just lied to you, basically. They just didn't want to go under contract with you because they found someone else that convinced them that they should get paid. That's what this conditional termination section does. It protects you. Now, it's very similar to a listing agreement. A listing agreement, if you want to cancel it early, there's a fee in there for that. And then it also says you have to pay out-of-pocket expenses and things like that. This buyer broker agreement just has the fee. So you really find out from somebody what their true intentions are, because it's very odd for a buyer to be looking for multiple properties for a very long time and then all of a sudden just say, I'm not going to buy anymore. Really? They put in all that time, effort, and energy. It can happen.
Sure.
And that's why the section is here, you know? So like, let's say somebody's job situation changes or they have to move somewhere else now. Okay. But you guys just spent all of this time, effort, and energy helping them find homes. So shouldn't you get compensated for that? What is that fee? And that's what this section is for. And again, like we talked about before, you can always waive a fee. If you really feel like they're being genuine and you don't want to charge them for it, okay, you can always waive it. Again, that needs to be run through Jordana because it's a brokerage agreement, you know?
Good thing I'm very reasonable and ethical.
Yeah.
What do you guys recommend as far as the fee goes?
It's up to you
Yeah,
guys.
that's the client.
It depends on the,
If you're showing like a $5 million buyer, you know, a $25,000 fee is totally acceptable. If you're showing someone that's looking at a much lower price point, they're not going to agree to a $25,000. And so it depends on so many things. It depends on you, huh? Gives you an idea.
Gives me an idea. If you want
What
to-
happens if you're showing 10 homes, maybe even more, and then, over multiple days?
Right?
And they say, I'm not buying, I've seen nothing, I'm not gonna buy, and you ask for the money and they say no.
Well, then we could, that's what we talked about. We have a system in place to pursue if we wanted to. We'd have to literally pursue them. A demand letter, right?
Yeah.
Possibly filing a lawsuit, right?
Yeah, the whole point of this agreement is to protect you guys if you need to pursue your compensation. And there are going to be a variety of different agreements. Some of them you've seen today. Some of them will come out from other brokerages, and not all of them do the same thing in terms of protecting you guys. So this form, like Jordana said, is like a 10. This is the form that's going to protect you the most because of this conditional termination section, and because it is not for single properties. It's
Right.
not for a region. It's just every property that they go look for, and it's for a duration of time that you guys agree to.
So I did set up, it wasn't easy, but I found a litigator because CJ's not a litigator that will help us in the situations that we have to litigate. So we have a situation right now where we're theoretically litigating, and I have a whole system in place, an attorney that's going to work with us to enable us to pursue if we need to. Lori. Don, I think you had a question?
Yeah, well, see, this document is signed prior to showing the property, right?
Correct.
So,
It can be.
so this amount.
It can be, doesn't have to
If
be.
you did a touring agreement.
Yeah.
first.
And then you switch, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
but let's say that, we'll get this signed. Cancellation fee
Mhm.
is noted before you sign this.
Yes.
So you gotta factor in the cost or price of the properties
Yeah.
that you're looking at to determine the fee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this agreement, like I said, is like the maximum protection. If you know you're just going to show one property to somebody, you may not even be using this agreement. If you know you're building a relationship with a client, well, you're not going to be using the other agreements, you're going to be using this agreement. So if you're talking with them, let's say they're coming to the office and you're doing your buyer presentation with them, which everybody should have a buyer presentation, just like a listing presentation you would have, you should have a buyer presentation.
Oh, yeah, we have one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so if you have someone coming to the office and you're talking with them, I mean, or if you're doing it virtually and you're talking about the different, properties and the different types of properties that you want to look at, you should probably get an idea of what's available out there. I mean, if you're looking and they've told you a price point that there's like 15 different properties, you already know you're going to have to do research into those 15 properties, and they may want to see them all. You may send them all of them and they may pick 10 of them, so you should kind of have an idea of like every buyer that you're working with, there's an average amount of time, effort, and energy that you're putting into a buyer. And you guys could even go back and figure this out over time. For those of you that have been doing it for a decent amount of time, how many buyers did I have this year? How much time did I spend with them? How, you know, what is my average earned compensation? Because if you deal with somebody and they don't close, you know, there's got to be a fee for that for you. What is that fee? And you need to determine that.
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts that I want to say, and I see there were some questions, Melissa, I'll get to you in a second, and I saw the chats. So I want to make a point that Des and I are working on some really cool things for us to be able to start from a buyer consultation and presentation standpoint,
Mhm.
to actually be able to start tracking what you're doing, so that it'll make it a little bit easier to decide, you know, how much are you charging somebody, or sorry, cancellation fee wise, right? So you can actually say, I've shown you this number of homes, I've spent this amount of time in my car, I've sent this many emails, this many phone calls, hours doing X, Y, and Z, which will again make this easier. So there's a lot of activities that we do, and there is, I think it's something like 89 hours, or maybe that's wrong, but there's a specific hour that you spend on average when you work with a buyer. Now, if you know that, and you sit across from the buyer and say, Sean, I've done this many, many times, and on average, this is how much time I spend. Because I spend that much time when I work with a client to help them purchase their homes, this is the cancellation fee that I charge, which only is a small portion of my time. So all of these conversations are, we're going to get better and better at as we have more and more skills. It's almost like I can't work fast enough to keep up with the amount of changes that are happening. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I saw the comment that Jesse made about the $2,500 as far as you had said, and then Mark agreed, who's going to sue somebody? We are. We're not going to sue, but we're going to issue a demand letter. So like I said, I have a system in place where I have an attorney that at no cost to us is going to issue a demand letter to the individual and say, Sherry, you have to pay Jesse the $2,500 because you are in default. So a demand letter is absolutely works. And if the demand letter doesn't work, there are going to be other options. So I wouldn't worry myself about that. If we get there, you have a good broker and I have a good system as far as if we need to go and collect.
Yeah, that would be, so you have an agreement like this signed, it hasn't terminated. And then you find out that the buyer went and bought another property that in violation of this agreement or the showing agreement. Or this agreement was terminated, maybe it was conditionally terminated, okay? So I want to point out the difference between conditional termination and unconditional termination. There is a conditional termination section in this agreement. And so the buyer is allowed to terminate it with conditions. What are those conditions? You pay us our fee. And then if you actually change your mind or you're lying to us and you go and buy another property, you have to pay us what our full fee was. Okay. So if you find out that a buyer does that and screws you over, now you have the opportunity to pursue your compensation. So that's what this agreement is protecting you. If you sign an unconditional termination with somebody, meaning you're waiving your fee, and you're just releasing them from this contract, like a release and cancellation from the as-is contract, you can still do that. You can choose to do that. Then you cannot pursue that person for anything that they purchase afterwards. So there is a difference there. That again is something that would have to be approved by Jordana. You can't just unconditionally terminate
without my knowledge.
Yeah, it has to be. You know, to protect yourselves, it should be a conditional termination. Right. And again, as Sherry just said, why would you do that? You guys are spending all of this time, effort, and energy helping people look for a home just for them to say, hey, I want to cancel this now. Well, okay, pay me for my time then. You know, that's what this section is saying. And when you're sitting down across from somebody, explaining them this agreement along with all of your other buyer presentation, if they ask you, hey, what is this for? Well, you can explain it to them. Yeah, well, I put in X amount of hours just to get started. You know, if 6 months down the line, you're like, I don't want to look for houses anymore, I have a fee. Okay, so that's if you have a year-long agreement and you're going to cancel.
You don't want somebody wasting your time that you just,
Right.
the
goal is to buy a house
Right.
with these people.
Yeah.
and you're not doing it for fun. You know, all those buyers that call us because they want to go on a tour of South Florida and they just want to check out neighborhoods. Okay, well, they can do that themselves. They don't need you to get in the car to do that.
Yeah.
I have a friend that did that to me. She wasn't sure if she wanted to be in Miami or Jupiter. And she had me go and take her. And I'm like, no, like that's the thing that you can do on your time as a professional. I don't need to be touring homes with you until you decide what area makes more sense. Melissa, go ahead. You have had your hand raised for a while. I think you have to unmute. Melissa? Okay. Or maybe you didn't mean to have your hand raised?
Did I miss the section about protected period?
It's in the earlier, broker fee.
Oh, so it is in there. I just didn't see it. Okay.
It's in the broker fee section. There's a blank line for it. Section.
And does a
yeah.
conditional termination waive that? Is that why you're saying you could still
Let's-
go after them if they
No.
want something?
So when you conditionally terminate, the conditional termination, has a protection period.
Yeah, it's
for-
right here.
So
Here, I'll let you answer.
when you do, when this contract naturally expires, okay, just like the regular buyer broker agreement, let's say it's for a year, okay, then it expires and you have a protection period of 90 days. When you do a conditional termination, it is the regular termination date through the protection period that you're protected through. Okay?
Okay.
Because you can void the conditional termination. So this section here has the protection period. Okay, so if we go for a year and the buyer waits you out because someone else is in their ear, then there's another 90 days if this is left blank, where if they go under contract, you're owed compensation. Okay, if you do the conditional termination, okay, the conditional termination is, I will let you out of this contract, you have to pay me. Boom, done. Right? The protection period comes in if you are going to void this. Broker may void the conditional termination and basically go back to the termination date plus the protection period because we found out that the buyer lied to us and made us conditionally terminate because they're going to go with another broker to buy the property. So that's how the two sections work together.
Yes.
Since the cancellation fee, you said termination fee?
I don't know, what do you think? I guess, I said the same thing.
It doesn't matter. It's not a defined term, so it could be called either.
Because you have another agreement cancellation, right?
I see what you're saying, but like CJ said, it's not like a defined term. I don't think it makes a difference if you, I don't know, maybe. I'll make a note to myself.
Yeah.
I'll think about it. Okay,
Could I ask something?
yes.
Hey CJ, hey Jordana, hey everyone.
Hi,
I'm
maybe
just
speak up a little. I
wondering-
can't hear you.
Can you hear me better now?
Not really. Juan,
What about now? Sorry, my mic's a little.
I think you just need to speak louder.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering in the case that for Jordana's friend, right, that they were looking in Miami and Jupiter, and obviously Jordana's in Boca, so she's dead set in the middle. Is there a way, for example, they like a tour guide all throughout these areas, but could we get a BBA signed and then have like someone on the team that works in Miami,
course.
show her, and then someone in Jupiter, for example?
For a showing assistant, that's what they did?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, you absolutely can get a buyer broker agreement signed. There's no reason why that would be different because of where that person's looking. So yes.
Actually,
Okay.
can we sign something that says me showing or a showing assistant, because I do have a showing assistant. So in that case, how do I?
That's a great question. I had not heard that question yet. Did you hear? That's a great
Yeah,
question.
you can add it to the additional terms if you want,
I do show, showing.
So-
assistant.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are additional
Yeah,
terms. on
every
here,
single
so-
one of these agreements,
Yeah.
the touring agreement, the single property agreement, and the buyer broker agreement all have additional terms. So if you felt like you needed to protect, I don't even feel that that's necessary, because if you have somebody on your team and this agreement and they're under us theoretically, this sort of still protects us because it's really an agreement with the brokerage. So I don't think you need to specify who's showing the home. So I'm not super worried about that. Okay, let me keep going. We only have a couple slides left and we're already over time.
Regardless, though, if you make an offer, that last one has to be the one that's signed.
If you make an
Go
offer,
from the showing agreement or the touring agreement.
no, you could use, the touring agreement has no fee being paid. If you.
You need to sign another agreement after the touring
Yes,
agreement.
the touring agreement is like
Yeah.
really like not to be used unless it's just about opening a door for someone, you don't know them and you just want to, okay. But if you are making an offer, you need to have either a buyer broker or a single property buyer rep. because both of those agreements specified that you're going to be paid.
And the compensation.
Yes, which I'm gonna talk about the compensation agreements next. I wanted to let you guys know, and I probably shouldn't, but I did make a version of this that does allow for cancellations. Don't use it, but it's there in case there is a client that's like, I won't sign it unless, because it's conditionally, just, it's there, but don't use it.
Just really quick, imagine you're signing a touring agreement because you just got a call from somebody, hey, I want to go look at this property now. Okay, great, I'll meet you over there. You have the touring agreement. You also should bring one of these other agreements with you to get paid. You tour them the property, you're talking to them, you're building the relationship. Now let's sign our agreement for you to get paid. Because you can't just let them leave and then what happens? You just had them sign an agreement where you're not going to get paid. Okay? There are going to be some of you that will say, well, then why do I need a touring agreement? If you can get the client to sign one of these other agreements first, then don't use the touring agreement. It's a lead into other agreements, but some people are just not going to be able to do that. And that's why it's available. Okay. So the showing agreement, the single property agreement, and the regular buyer broker agreement, those ensure that you will get paid.
But can I ask you, let's say that I go to the property, I sign one touring agreement.
Okay,
And you want to put an offer.
then you need an agreement.
So, but the commission agreement. do I
No.
You need an
No.
agreement from the
Buyer.
signed.
Okay, so that,
Touring agreement does not say you will get paid. You will not get paid because of that agreement.
so what you need is you need an agreement that says the buyer acknowledges that you are gonna put your compensation in the offer. And then when you make the offer, I think on the next page here is the compensation agreement, I hope, maybe? Okay, yes. So let me continue a little bit and it sort of addresses your point, Maria. Okay, so you got your buyer broker agreement signed. Fantastic. You're ready to make the offer. Now what do? How do you make sure the seller pays you? So in Transaction Desk or Form Simplicity, all of these agreements have been uploaded. So as you can see, there's options. There's the compensation agreement when the seller is paying us. There's the compensation agreement when the seller's broker is paying us. Okay. So there's also some modification agreements too. I think I maybe have them here. Okay, I do. You want to make sure that you are using the appropriate form. I think I also linked it. Let's see.
If you find that out, I'm sure you're gonna answer that. But how are you gonna know which one? When you find that out in the.
This is a question that I get asked every single time. We would prefer that you know the answer to this before you show a property.
To call the agent and ask?
Yes.
So the listing agent,
Okay.
think about this before you show a property, okay, and before you talk numbers with your buyer, don't you need to know whether they're gonna be paying your compensation or the seller's paying it? Yeah. That is one of the biggest things that agents have been giving me pushback on. Well, what if I can't get this information? What do I do? Okay, well, how are you gonna submit an offer if you don't have this information? You could submit an offer blindly with the seller paying the compensation. But wouldn't it be so much better if you have spoken to the listing agent first and find out this information?
Some of them, they don't answer.
Some of them don't answer. They do.
They never answer.
100%. So every offer, and this is what I was talking about too, with like the agent or the brokerages that will not offer cooperating broker compensation. They're gonna be making it harder for their sellers,
Right.
you know?
Okay, so are you telling her to stop talking?
No.
Oh.
Sean had a question for her.
Oh, you had a question?
No, Sean, he just left.
Where do you put outgoing mail? In the mailbox?
Put the little red thing here.
Okay, somebody's asking, Melissa's asking, is it also in Form Simplicity? Yes. The question is, can you put a percentage instead of $1? Yes.
It's like, what's a mail?
Oh. That's funny. What's a mailbox?
They know me and serve, and then you just go ahead and fill this out and we have the broker. I mean, you know.
So you're telling me to tell everyone to shut up? So you can pay attention?
Please do.
Okay,
It's something, yeah. You know,
um,
and if they say, no, that's not how it works. but-
okay.
And that can be on the.
So-
Yeah, yeah.
Like CJ was saying, we have to get this information. You have to ask. If they don't answer, I would text, I would email. You have to sort of get in touch. If worst case scenario and you have to show it without knowing, you can absolutely still submit an offer. And remember, just like all offers are it's just starting the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to put an offer together and you don't know what's going on, you could theoretically include in there this agreement. So this agreement basically states that the buyer's broker, which would be us, and whoever the seller is, are going into an agreement whereby our compensation comes from that seller. It is a very straightforward document. It's just, but this has to be included. It cannot just be in the additional terms. So Madison, if I call you and say, are you guys offering a cooperating commission? And you can say, yes, the seller is, or you can say, you know, we're open to it, include it in your offer. I'm going to include this. Now, if you tell me, yes, it's a broker to broker compensation, there's a different agreement. So that other agreement looks similar. I think I linked it. I didn't. It looks similar, except it says that the seller's broker is the one that's paying us.
And why would they do that?
So why would they do that? When you go to a seller, right, and you tell them, I suggest that you're offering a 2.5% commission if a buyer is working with a broker.
Yes.
That's that scenario where the listing agreement is going to be for that higher amount, let's say 6% or 5%, of which you're keeping a portion and the rest you're paying to another broker.
But then what's the seller one?
The seller is okay, so another example would be you're the seller and you tell me, Jordana, I really just want to be responsible for paying you.
Yeah.
Let the buyer's broker negotiate that fee with their buyer. We would just sign an agreement for 3%, which is, by the way, something that I am sort of suggesting. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. When I go to meet with sellers, I'm going to be telling them this is my opinion. I charge 3%. This agreement says I'm going to get paid 3%. If a buyer calls me and is unrepresented, I will be happy to do both parties and for 1 additional percent for a total of 4. What I'm going to suggest to my sellers, depending on the property, by the way, I do not want to pre-negotiate the buyer's agent commission. That's between them and their buyer. So what we're going to do, Mr. Seller, is we're going to be open to offers of compensation, and it's going to be submitted in their offer.
And if they say 3, what if my seller's like, no?
It's all negotiable. It's all part of the negotiation.
Or if we say, if the seller's like, oh, we're offering 2, and I'm like, you know what, I'll accept the 2. So do we submit the seller one and just like 2, and then it's even, like, agreed upon?
It's crazy. Yes, it's whatever's agreed upon. That's what you have to get. That's the agreement you have to get.
You have to submit that anyway, because if you
Yeah.
call them and they say, we're offering 2%.
Exactly.
You say,
Because then your buyer broker is gonna say 3%, so then.
Yeah.
They're on.
Right, so-
1%.
So also other scenarios for sale by owner, it's listed on the MLS. There's obviously no compensation being offered, so the seller has to directly pay your compensation if it's for sale by owner. You have these flat rate listing places too, where you're really dealing with the seller, you know, they just paid to put it on the MLS. And then, you know, so there's a lot of different scenarios where it would be the seller directly paying for you. The listing broker one is only if the listing broker has in their listing agreement that they're offering cooperating broker compensation. And there will be a lot of places that do that too, because I already have been told by a lot of places, well, we're going to use that as a strategy to attract more buyers agents too. It's going to be all over the place. And I don't know what it's going to settle on. I think it's just going to continue to be all over the place as to how people negotiate their listing agreements.
I really think it depends on the property, you guys. Like if there's a property that's really, really competitive and there's not a lot available, the seller might say, you know what, I don't want to offer a cooperating commission. If somebody wants to include it in their offer, they can. It's negotiable.
Yeah.
I want to address, Mia has a question. I have a seller and I need to start preparing for the listing. To ensure we comply with the law, can I ask the seller to agree to a competitive commission of 5 or 6%? You absolutely can. You absolutely can. We can still do listing broker pays, so we collect 6, and then listing broker pays the buyer's broker. You absolutely can.
So
Okay, great. And but I need to explain to him the cooperative broker compensation, or
Yes.
okay, just get it out of the way, which I think
Well-
he's gonna do 6% like the standard. So to
Yeah,
make
so
it easy.
Mia, what you need to explain is how much you charge and what you're going to be offering to the cooperating agency. Now, in that example, Mia, just to give you another sort of perspective, I don't know, like if you want to tell him to pay, let's say 6%, what if that buyer only asked for 2.5? I'm sorry, that buyer's agent only asked their buyer for 2.5. if that's the case, you now have your seller who's paying an additional 0.5% for nothing, right? And actually, technically, in that case, the buyer's broker can't collect 3% because you cannot collect higher than what's on the agreement.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, I don't think, in some cases, from a marketing perspective, it makes sense to offer the incentive and to say, we are offering all cooperating agents 2.5 or 3%. Think of it like a car dealership. You guys remember during the pandemic, it was like impossible to get a car. Like there were no incentives. Like if you wanted to go to the dealer, they were like, yeah, you're going to pay, you know, the full sticker price. Then at the end of the year, when they're trying to get rid of their last year models, now all of a sudden they're like, CJ, you know what? You come here, I'm going to give you, you know, $1,000 off MSRP or whatever. That's the same situation as whether or not you offer a commission. It depends on whether it's a marketing tool. It's an incentive that you're offering to the seller to attract other people. So Mr. Seller, I would like to bring in as many buyers as I can. I would like you to give me at least 2.5 to offer to other agents, depending on the property.
Yeah. The other thing too is you have to have these conversations with the sellers about the types of offers that they will get. So for instance, if they're offering cooperating broker compensation, they're going to get offers that maybe don't ask for as many seller concessions. Versus if you're not offering cooperating broker compensation, any offer that's being financed is probably going to come with an ask for seller concessions. You know, like that's something that you should be aware of in telling your sellers. You know, so because they're going to ask you, well, should we offer cooperating broker compensation? Should we not offer it? And you could say, well, honestly, every deal is going to be structured differently depending on whether or not the buyers are getting financing. If it's a cash transaction, you know, it's better for the buyer if the buyer pays the cooperating broker compensation because the purchase price could be lower, right? If it's being financed, a buyer may not be able to afford to pay the cooperating broker compensation. So they either need seller concessions or they need the seller to pay.
Hello, you froze.
Okay, so in the interest of time, what did you say? Someone said something?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
That's okay, go ahead.
On a cash deal, can the buyer still pay both sides?
Yeah, you can negotiate anything on it.
Okay, one thing CJ said.
Separate agreements though, to show that. You can't just do it on an as-is contract.
Okay, so one thing that CJ said that I think is a really great way for all of us to think about it is it's all about how you structure the deal. It's all about structuring a deal. Who's paying? It's like a structure. It's essentially what it is. Now, let me quickly show you guys this document that lives on Drive.
And that's why you need a professional negotiator and a contacts expert.
That's right.
This is why you guys get paid.
Right.
Hey, yeah, this is complicated buying a house, how we structure this deal, how we negotiate it. That is why you are hiring me. So that's an excellent point, William.
Yeah. Okay, so this cheat sheet that you're looking at in front of you has a link to everything and it explains everything. So if you don't remember all the different things, I wrote it all out for you. It could not be easier than this, right? And it links to all of them, which I will be updating. You know, these are Google Docs that I'll update, you know, little by little as things change, like the 2 words that we decided to add in.
Always use that link to get the document.
Yeah, always use these links. I was going to put them into Transaction Desk, but then I realized I didn't want to PDF it because there were so many changes. So again, you guys have to go to the POA, find it, and then get it signed. And then, yeah. So the compensation agreements are also linked here, and these seller forms, which we will do a separate meeting for because I think it's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, we're way over time at this point.
We're way over time, but I do want to thank you guys for hanging in for, you know, over an hour. I wanted to I know you guys have been sort of asking questions before we end. Does anybody have any other questions that were not answered?
I've got 2.
Okay.
I've been saving them for the end. You mentioned putting a second piece of paper and writing the properties on a separate piece of paper and noting that it's on a second sheet. Could we just put them on the back and say listed properties on back and maybe have the buyer initial on the back?
It's also like a Google Doc, so you could plug them. If you're doing it electronically, you could just plug it in there and make the section longer too.
Right, but if you have a hard copy, can they do it on the back?
Yeah.
Yes, you
see
can write on the
back.
back.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question was, is there a possibility of having an addendum or something to modify the commission? Say we've got a buyer brokerage for 3% and you've got new construction offering 4%. Can I go back to the buyer and say, I need you to amend this so that I can accept that other
Yeah,
1%.
there's the Florida Realtors put out a modification of compensation agreement that you can use. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of the questions too. I'm gonna put in our Slack too, the event that we're gonna do with the NAR VP. So I've been doing different trainings like this, and there's different questions, but there's a lot of repeat questions. New construction, especially, you know, you guys are Treasure Coast and North, a lot of new construction, they offer 4%. I think it's well within NAR guidelines to be able to say, my fee is 3% for resale properties and 4% for new construction. I think that that's totally fine. It's one of the questions we're going to continually ask. We do not have clear answers from the Florida Realtors and the legal hotline. I've had realtors call the legal hotline and ask different attorneys on there the same question and get different answers. So all of this stuff is new, but in terms of the NAR guidelines, they want it to be conspicuous and they do not want it to be open-ended. So I don't see why you wouldn't be able to say for this type of property, for instance, you said for vacant land, why can't you say for vacant land, I have a flat fee of this, you know, and I have a percentage for, you know, you should be able to do that as these forms evolve, but it's so brand new that there's not clear answers on some of these things, but we're going to continually ask these questions and try to get clarification. And as I was telling you guys in the beginning, don't let something hold you back from getting paid. If you come to an agreement with your client to get paid for a certain amount, and it is very clear, the odds of that being struck down as not being clear or being, you know, conspicuous or it being too vague, it's very unlikely. You know, we're in the real estate business to get deals done. Buyers want to buy, sellers want to sell. We're deal makers, we're negotiators. If everything's out on the table and everybody understands it, odds are it's fine. You know, it's where people are trying to hide things from their clients. That's what NAR and the settlement are trying to prevent from happening. So
I just wanted to make sure that there was
to help with too.
Yeah, I was just wanting to make sure there was a way to modify the commission after the fact, so that if I've got a
yes
new construction deal and they say, hey, we have a $2,000 bonus on these already built properties for quick sale, and I can't accept that $2,000 unless I go back to the buyer and say, hey, are you okay with me taking this $2,000? You are? Can you sign this for me?
Yeah, and one of the things you didn't mention is the bonuses.
Oh, yeah.
The NAR VP talked to Jordana from Florida Realtors and said that you can't put the bonuses in the buyer broker agreement as an open-ended thing. So
You can.
that's what yeah, but it makes no sense to me either, because bonuses are something that buyers would never be paying you to begin with. So why is this even related to the buyer broker agreement?
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be certain things that change and evolve as we go along, because certain things just don't make sense. We learned that the VA is now going to allow buyers to pay the buyer broker compensation. So that's something that just changed recently that we all thought might change, but you know, we had to wait for it to actually come out so that we can hear that. You know, so there's going to be a lot of different things that evolve. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. I did put the link in the Eventbrite for the Eventbrite already in your legal channel in Slack. So anyone that's interested in coming to that, if you are not in South Florida, in Broward, we're going to try to take that show on the road and go further up north as time goes on too. So, you know, sit tight. It's not going to be a Zoom event, unfortunately. But that's
Where's it being held?
it's in Dania. Yeah, it's near Dania Point. You know where that like mall shopping center is there? Yeah.
Where did you send it?
It's in this legal channel and Slack.
Quick question for Jordana or for so for this specific case, so I just have to do a new listing, the new listing agreement. I mean, the new listing agreement or another.
If you are listing it, if you're listing before August 17th, you can use the current listing agreement in Transaction Desk. So Mia, you could use the same one that you've used in the past.
Okay, and do I have to send him to sign a cooperative broker compensation?
No, it's all written in the listing agreement. It explains the cooperating.
Oh, perfect. And where do you put the incentive? I mean, if you cannot put it on the MLS, how do you know the buyer broker you have an incentive 3%?
It'll be in the MLS until the 17th. Then that field is going away. And then Mia, people are going to call you and say, what is the seller offering? And you have to tell them the seller is offering this.
Okay, you Put it on the
It's
house
August
description.
13th for the Miami.
Oh, it's August 13th. That's
For
less.
Miami, I got an email,
Oh.
so I didn't see anything from Broward or Palm Beach, but are they all doing the
It's
13th?
13th?
They're all gonna take it
Brevard
out
is doing
on
the
13th.
15th.
Okay. Any other, let's see, if we're under contract now and scheduled to close, do we, no, you do not need to do anything. You're fine.
So I have a listing appointment next week. so-
Okay. You have a listing appointment next week. So the question is, what listing agreement do you use?
Yeah.
Do you plan to ask,
Yeah, we will be going over.
do you plan to ask for the seller to offer a cooperating
Yes.
commission to the buyer's broker? So then you would use the existing listing agreement.
Yes.
If you want to go and have an option of asking only for your own commission,
Mhm.
then you can use the link that's on the cheat sheet. Although I will be changing that document.
I'm just curious what we have, cause.
You can use the current listing agreement,
So like my listing is for a year.
You're-
so I'm good.
You're
already
fine.
Under contract.
right? There's no need to change any of that.
Yeah, you don't have to change any of the current listing agreements. I have a feeling Florida Realtors will put out a modification. So like, when they changed with the Florida, the as-is contract, when they added all the language for the foreign buyers in there, they came out with an addendum for contracts that were previously signed. So I have a feeling they'll come out with an addendum to listing agreements. I don't know if they will or not. I'm actually gonna check to see, because they're supposed to come out with the listing agreement today. So
So just stay tuned, because if it comes out today, Madison, it might be different for next week. Okay, thank you guys so much. It's been about an hour and a half. I really appreciate all of your patience and time and your participation and your great questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.
they